I think a lot of coaches really struggle with where that line is between, and again, they're stuck between this kind of rock and a hard place. Like they're kind of screwed either way. But presenting, having the public persona not only of their program but of their university and of themselves. I mean, some of them don't want their athletes to have tattoos. Some of them, certainly don't want their athletes caught drinking on a Friday night. There's all sorts of, they have dress codes walking through the airport. Like, where's that line? And I'm sure this is sort of a longer conversation, but where's that line of letting someone be who they are, but sort of, and making sure that their performance is okay and that they're happy human beings, but then also sort of, this sounds sort of shallow, but protecting the brand, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly something that we're going to see more and more of, especially as programs and athletes themselves become brands.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that a lot in recent years, and it's a real difficult line to walk. Wanting, in a sense, some conformity that goes with being a part of a team or being a part of a brand, but also allowing athletes and coaches to retain their individualism. And so I don't know that I exactly have a short and easy answer to that kind of question, because you are really stuck, But I think, again, if you can just come back to this idea of inclusion for all, and stop making it be about just sexual orientation, because that's not the only issue we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about lots of different core aspects of people's identities that we're trying to incorporate to get the best out of our athletes, performance-wise, and for them to get the optimal experience. And I think if we can, keep reminding people about that and make that what our brand is really about, I think that we can maybe find, a good place that's kind of in between, that people will understand, the motivation behind being an inclusive, a diverse and inclusive space. And I think that if you can get it back to that base level of respect and inclusion, and make that your brand, then I think that there might be a way to kind of work with some of even the social and media-based fears.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that message. I think that's something that everybody can come back to, because it is nuanced. And you and I talked about this, but I think from a social perspective, I think there's a lot of us that kind of feel like it's 2013, like get with the program. But you're talking about sometimes conservative fans, conservative media, conservative schools, and as you said, coaches have mortgages and job pressures, and they're trying to balance it all. So there is this sort of, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, and I like that, that you can kind of just keep bringing it back to respect. I like that message.
Yeah, and then certainly, that's just it. Is as much as coaches love their athletes, coaching is still a job, and they still have lives to protect and families to protect. And so, it's definitely understandable that coaches feel uncertain about this, and that they, don't necessarily want to be out in front holding up a banner, changing the way things are in that loud and out there kind of way. I can understand that and sympathize with that. And certainly, my approach has always been to focus on meeting people where they're at. And, certainly with what I do, I could very easily say, as 2013, I shouldn't even have a job. Like, we should be past this. but that's not where everybody's at. Everybody's at a different place, and you've got to kind of assess, okay, where is this person at, and what can we do? We can, we'll take 1 inch at a time if that's what we need to do, and we go slowly. I've been a part of a rowing program for several years, and there's a lot of language that flies around when we're working out sometimes, and each year I pick one word that I'm going to try and eliminate from their vocabulary that might be sexist or homophobic, and or disrespectful, and we go slowly, one word at a time, but we go inch by inch, and that's what we have to do. Sometimes when we go at people, guns blazing, they get fearful, they get defensive, and they really shut down. And we really need to meet them where they're at, and go as slowly as they need to go, as best we can.
What are some words that you think, maybe some words that maybe aren't expected, that are that should be, what am I trying to say? Eliminated from our language.
Well, I don't see, honestly, I don't see it as much in women's sports as I see it in men's sports. Certainly, I think in women's sports, the butch, dyke, lesbo, lesbian, she, man. I mean, those are some of the words that we might hear in women's sports. Interestingly, often used by men against women rather than women against other women. Although that's certainly something that happens as well. But those are some words that, again, often are related to any good, strong female athlete, can often be labeled with those words simply by being a strong female in general.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's tricky because as student athletes, women are praised for, displaying what we would consider traditionally male characteristics, being independent and strong and athletic and focused and aggressive. And yet we praise them for those things and punish them with the language we use to describe them when they do display them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of tricky, in that respect. On the men's side, the list is a lot longer, and I've worked with a lot of male teams where, any male athlete who, kind of fails to live up to that, that's the standard male stereotype, is often going to be put down, is going to be called a sissy or a mama's boy, or a fag or a faggot, a pussy, a bitch, all kinds of language that is used, and not just by male athletes against other male athletes, but by coaches against male athletes.
Yeah, we certainly saw that.
I was working, sorry?
So we certainly saw that recently, didn't we?
Yes, and and it comes up often, and it's really too bad. I was working with a group of young men, and we were doing an activity related to this. We were talking about different kinds of language, and a lot of these words were up on the board. And I said, this is the kind of language we just can't use these words. And the first guy to raise his hand, first thing out of his mouth was, "I don't understand why not. Coach uses them all the time."
Jeez.
And so, here I am thinking, okay, well, Coach is going to have his diversity session tomorrow. But it's a real tricky, because when those things are reinforced by coaches, it's difficult for the student athletes. First of all, it sets a certain tone for the culture, but it's also difficult for the student athletes to change that culture, because that becomes the way things are. And so if you're an athlete who's trying to get your teammates to stop using homophobic or sexist or even racist words, but your coach is using them all the time, it's a difficult road.
Sure.
So those are some of the things that we want to think about. And I've worked with coaches too who say, these are the words that motivate my athletes to be better. And I hate to be flip about it, but I say, well, if you want them to run faster, tell them to run faster. Don't impugn their maleness, their manhood, and a lot of these words that have to do with not measuring up as a man or a woman, actually the words are homophobic. So we kind of correlate this idea of not measuring up as a man or a woman with being homosexual. And gender and sexuality are two completely different things. Language is a real tricky one, especially in athletics, because it's much more prevalent in athletics than in other spheres of life.